Good evening, everyone. I've got a very interesting gentleman to introduce you to tonight. Tim Moore is his name. He's been very successful in business, and he wants to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship and leadership and what it takes to be a great leader and a great entrepreneur. Tim Moore, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Pleasure to be here.
It's my honor, sir. So tell us a little bit about your career, if you could, because I've gotten quite a long description of some of the things that you've been involved in from your friend Mark, and it's really quite impressive. Why don't you tell us, though?
Well, I founded about three national organizations, and I probably founded about five companies. And, I look back and I'm still feel grateful and blessed I've been able to achieve what I achieved. But it started, like, if you go back to my early days, there were probably a lot of bets against me because I'm probably the only person you'll ever know that failed grade three. I dropped math at the end of grade 10. I was told at Micah Power High School in West End, Toronto, I couldn't go past grade 12 without my math. I never took math beyond that year. Took grade 12 and I failed. And I was told by the Basilian priest, I really didn't have the aptitude to go beyond grade 12, that I should go to work. I didn't listen to them. I repeated grade 12. Then I went on, I took grade 13, and I failed grade 13 with a 35 average.
Oh my God.
So there were a lot of people betting against me. And one thing I learned, though, is that to this day, I don't like people telling me what I can and cannot do. I was a jock. I played a lot of sports. But it was beyond grade 13, I decided to go back to what I was thinking of for a few years, educated by the priest. I decided, you know what, I do want to become a priest. So I went to St. Augustine Seminary in Scarborough. And I was there, started in class of 67. I was there for 3 years. I left 3 years later. All my friends had left the seminary. And I got a job teaching up in Sudbury, Ontario on a letter of permission. And I taught for 2 years. And it confirmed something that I really love kids. I love the teaching profession. And I knew I was going to be a teacher. But the money was so bad, I went back and went back to school, got a degree at Waterloo, an honor degree, interesting. And then I went to McGill. I wanted to go to McGill to work on a master's degree. So I'd move up a couple of categories, make more money in the teaching profession. So halfway through the year at McGill, I ran out of money and I was broke. And I traded my old Volkswagen in for a pickup truck. Now, a pickup truck's not very long. It only has an 8-foot box on it. Put steel rods on all corners, put a tarpaulin on top, started advertising in McGilldale, a few other areas. And I got very busy. I ended up making more money moving furniture in 2 days than I did a week of teaching. So that was my foray into the moving business. And, after 3 months, I bought my second truck and I started a company called TC Moore. And I was a truck driver for about 8 years. Did I like moving furniture day in and day out? No, I didn't. But I liked to make money and I liked the challenges and I loved meeting people. And so I did that to 1978. It was
Moving furniture with two trucks.
With actually, it was probably about 5 or 6 trucks by the time I finished. But all I wanted to do was go back to teaching. So I sold it. I was going to go back to teaching. But my accountant at the time, a CA, said, why would you leave the moving business? You've done very well. You've been very profitable. You made good money. Why don't you get into the big leagues and move people long distance rather than just locally primarily? So I said, no, I still want to go back to teaching. He said, look, consider do this for 3 years. I'll come in and partner with you. And then after 3 years, we'll sell out and you go back to teaching. Because I had a job offer in the West End, Toronto. And I thought about it. I said, oh, okay, we'll do that. So that's when I bought M.J. Campbell Moving and Storage. Been around 30 years. So they were North American van line. So I went from having a small local company into a van line.
So you bought that or you created it?
Yeah. Well, so we bought, myself and this other chap, we bought M.J. Campbell. It was a North American Van Lines agent. So now I can move people long distance or worldwide, whatever. So So that's how I really get into the business in a big way.
And how long were you with that business?
Well, I stayed in that business till 2000. So I was in that business for 20, 22 years. And
And grew it?
well, grew it like, when my partner said, build it up over 3 years and then sell it, what happened after 3 years is that we took it from 200,000 in sales up to just over 3 million. Then I bought him out. And that was a whole nother story. And I get into in my books, one of my books, I talk about partnerships. And that was a good partnership for 3 years. I needed his financial expertise. He needed me as an operator. So, and from there, I grew the business. I mean, I took it to 1979, I sold controlling interest. But I can get into that and the details and what happened. But it was, anyway, we did very well. And it was a great story about good people.
So what's the secret to that? You failed grade 3, you failed math, you failed grade 12 or 13 twice. But yet you got your bachelor's with honors. You got accepted to a master's even if you didn't finish it. You started a business. You struggled with that business. You excelled with that business. There's this story of not giving up and resilience.
Oh, you're right. I
Where does
mean,
that come from, sir?
yeah, that's internal, and that's how, you in life we all have to learn how to survive. Everybody does, and certainly in business you got to survive. And from the time I can go back to 1971 when I started my little moving company. The very first week, somebody called me up and said, "How much would it cost to move 1.5 rooms of furniture from Boston to Montreal?" I didn't even know how far Boston was. And I didn't understand how the van lines worked. The van lines worked on consolidated shipments. They put a lot of shipments on the same trailer, but I called the van lines. They gave me a quote, and I said, "Geez, I can't charge that much." So I said to the chap, I said, "Look, pay my gas and give me $45." So I take my pickup truck in a blistering, blinding snowstorm with him in the front seat with me. And halfway down, he said, "Gee, Tim, I really got you to do this move for me. The cheapest price I could have got was if I'd rented a truck for $300. That didn't make me feel very good. And so it took me 24 hours there and back to do the move. Lost money, obviously. But Brian, I never did that again. I learned. So from experience after experience, as long as you learn from your experiences, you will grow. And I grew, and when I just come out of the seminary, of course, I was a nice guy, I'd do anything for anybody. But I became very street smart. It's not always a nice world out there. So you have to learn how to survive in business. And you got to be wary and you got to be tough. And so I have I had that very spiritual, soft side to me, but I also have that survival, tough side to me that I only developed through experience. And so I grew it to 1979. I've been in the business 1979 for about probably around 18 years. And I'll be honest, I was burnt out. I think AMJ Campbell was probably doing the 80 to 100 million range. And we got approached by a venture capitalist firm, a chap named Albert Natt. Albert Natt was a senior executive at Lang Mitchell law firm. And they were buying up companies. They bought A&A Records, and they were looking at us. So I still remember Albert Natt coming out to my office. Now we bought the land and built a 75,000 square foot facility, which became the finest moving facility in North America. We did it very high end. And I remember Albert saying to me, he says, "Jesus Christ, I feel like I'm on Bay Street." So that was kind of a compliment in a way because he was very, very impressed. And so did we controlling interest? In a way, yes. In a way, no. I think I was burnt out. And I said, so we agreed, we did a deal. We sold 70% to Albert Natt and the venture capitalists. Now, interesting, they had a board. One of my reasons for doing it, it had extremely high-end board members. The former Chief Justice Bud Esty, John Tory, the former mayor, Ray Sahi, who today is the CEO of Morguard Group, senior executives at TD Bank. And I'm thinking, you know what? This is going to give us an awful lot more corporate business. and give us a lot of credibility. And so we did the deal. So so it worked out very well. The only thing with me is that in 1988, I'd bought property in Chester, Nova Scotia. My wife had really for years wanted me to move down to the Maritimes. So I was building a house in the Maritimes. So that was front and center with me selling controlling interest. Even though he's selling controlling interest, I felt comfortable that as long as the group stayed intact, and they would, is that we would still control the business because it's all about the people. So anyway, it was we did the deal with them,
And when was that, sir?
that was 1989, and it was
89 is when you sold the controlling interest?
Yeah, yeah.
And this is when did you start it? When you were 3 years?
I bought MJ Campbell in 78, and then I stayed as CEO until 89, and
So 11 years.
Yeah. So when I saw it, I did want to move to the East Coast. I paid my dues.
And so did you move to the East Coast in 89?
I basically I started to commute, and so there was conditional. With me selling, I had to stay for 2 years full time. And even though I'd sold, I was still the largest individual shareholder. I think I had about 10%. So I had to stay 2 years. So I stayed about a year and a half. The company continued to do very well. Vector was very happy. They said, okay, Tim, you can retire, and we'll put this other guy in as president. So I retired. When I say retired, I just wanted to go back to the East Coast and work on the East Coast. I've been working 7 days a week for 20 years. And I just think I was tired. And my wife, I want to spend more time at home with my wife and kids. So that's what happened.
So you've been retired for 30 years?
No, I've retired a couple of times, but I keep going back. So what happened in 89, I stayed till 90, and I left. And they put a new president in. And then, of course, the recession hit in 1992. And I will say it was a devastating recession. And, I talk in my books, and here's one book. I talk about debt and things of that nature. And there's a lot of things there. These are great for potential entrepreneurs. You notice the heading is How to Succeed and Survive as an Entrepreneur. And so anyway, 1992 hit, and I was in Chester. I started a couple other. I was thinking of going back to teaching. Actually, I had been offered a job to teach in Bridgewater, Ontario, and in Nova Scotia. But anyway, the recession hit, and Albert Nat called me, and Albert said, "Look, we AMJ Campbell lost $2 million in 5 months, and they were struggling with A&A Records, which they bought." And so I said, okay, Albert, I'll come back, but with certain conditions attached. So I came back again to run the company as CEO. So the fellow who was president went back to senior vice president. So that brought me back into the business. So
how long were you back that time?
Well, 2 years full time, but I stayed on as CEO to 1999.
So another 10 years in the business. What a fascinating story. We're going to have to take a break, though, and come back with Tim Moore and his story of resilience and entrepreneurial ventures and entrepreneurial success and leadership in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Back in just 2 minutes.
Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting tonight with Tim Moore. He's a Canadian entrepreneurial success story. He's written 2 books. He has got a really interesting and colorful background. He's been successful in the moving business and in other areas. And we're exploring his career and his life on our show tonight. Tim, I understand that you're in a beautiful hotel in PEI today. Is that true?
Yes, I'm in Delvey by the Sea Inn, owned by the Murphy family, Danny Murphy in particular. So it's a spectacular place. And Danny's been so kind to me. I mean, he put on a nice lobster dinner last night, and then I wake up this morning and I said to my wife, I have no tie. I said, I probably should put a tie on. So I called Danny this morning, can you give me a tie? Anyway, just fantastic people. I mean,
And this is in Prince Edward Island, whereabouts?
uh, it's a good question. I'm not even sure. We got off the bridge and we drove for about 45 minutes. My wife is a navigator, so I'm not exactly sure. But we're actually going to a wedding close to Charlottetown tomorrow.
Awesome. Um, you're now living in Atlantic, Canada?
In Atlantic, Canada, in Chester, Nova Scotia, which is, again, I can't say enough about it. I'm just so grateful that my wife dragged me down here 33 years ago to move to Chester. And then all that being said, my wife could be there 12 months a year. Uh, I've said years ago, I said, Bernie, I got to get out 4 or 5 months. I got to get out of here. So we move around quite a bit. We have a condo in Toronto and Yorkville, and we have a place in Villa in Barbados, and we rent out, and we have a place in Naples, Florida. So we do get away. It's kind of nice.
And where's Chester, versus Halifax, if you could orient us?
Chester's on the South Shore, and about 50 minutes from Halifax, and even though we still have a place in Halifax, Halifax has become a world-class city, and I highly recommend it to anybody. But Chester sort of it was originally inhabited by Americans. Most of our neighbors are Americans, but it's a very special place, and with an incredible community. And I can't overemphasize where else on the planet would anybody want to be 7 months a year? My wife could be there 12 months, but 7 or 8 months.
Seven for you.
I love it. Just love it.
My brother and his partner have an art gallery somewhere around there, I think, called 5 Acre Gallery. So they brag about how beautiful it is right on the ocean.
Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful parts of the world. And certainly in Canada, Chester is sort of one of the happening places. So
So
I'm very blessed.
you've traveled the world. You've got homes around the world. Tell us a little bit about Canada. Why still keep the connection with Canada? You said a place in Florida, Naples. You've got a place in Barbados. You're obviously well traveled. What's the connection to Canada?
First of all, I got a few friends that who I discussed moving out of Canada, basically for tax purposes. And I have a very good friend of mine that moved to Jupiter, Florida, and I considered it not just for the taxes, but maybe we want to move. But my wife is a hardcore maritimer, and of course, over the years, I've said, you know what? Why would I ever move from Chester or Nova Scotia? I mean, I've seen Halifax evolve into one of the finest cities in North America. I mean, the boardwalk down there is priceless. But it's really the quality of life here that not that I didn't think about moving. For tax purposes, I thought about moving to Alberta. My brother's in Alberta, but you know what? I never did it because the quality of life, quality of the people down here, the scenery, the beauty, you just don't get it anywhere. We've been everywhere, so we're just like we're right on a point. We have a 12,000 square foot home on 3 acres on a point, looking out to Mahone Bay with 300 islands. You see the mammals, the porpoises, the seals. I mean, it just doesn't get any better to me. Actually, no matter where we travel.
Sounds spectacular. You've written 2 books. What are the 2 books, sir? Can you tell us the titles?
Yeah, I was going to write the 2 books, but the thing how this actually started, Alan Gould, who wrote 35 books, yeah, he was a journalist. And it all started with him, actually, because he called me in about 1987. He said, Tim, I write for Chatelaine, I write for a few magazines, and I'd like to interview you. I said, sure, come on out. No, so he came out, and he interviewed me for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then he said, you know what? You're going to be in my book. And I said, Alan, you didn't tell me you're writing a book. So he says, I'm writing the book, and it's going to be called 80 Canadian Success Stories. So I got a few pages in that. And then the more he learned about me, he says, you know what, we should do a book about you. I said, well, it's always about the company and the business for me. How can I promote the business and how can I promote our staff and grow this company so everybody wins? Because I'll always have a lot of partners. So he got me going. And so we wrote the book. Again, this one is called On the Move, How to Survive as an Entrepreneur.
On the Move by Tim Moore.
On the Move, yeah. And the second book, of course, came a few years later, That's when, again, you don't need an MBA to make millions. I pride myself that one of the things I talk about in here are partners. And I've talked over the years a number of people who own businesses and they refuse to have a partner, which I don't quite understand that. As long as you control the company in terms of the number of shares that you own, it's never bothered me. So I've had about 200 partners in my career.
200 different partners.
Yep. And almost without exception, I've had a couple bad ones, but almost without exception, it worked out well. And I wouldn't have been able to grow and create three national organizations with offices basically across the country or business across the country without bringing key people in. The thing I did differently, and it talks about that in both books too, is I never put an ad in the paper to hire anybody. Everybody I came in contact with is a potential employee or a potential partner. And I've hired lawyers, accountants, bankers, Olympian athletes from all walks of life. And because what I do by not putting an ad in the paper, I just observe people. You get, if you can watch somebody for a period of weeks or months, or in a couple of places, a couple of years, and then you learn you'll learn everything about them, how they get along with their colleagues, how they communicate, how they feel about life in general. And it's really about good people. And I have always lived and breathed service. That's why I worked, 7 days a week. I got burnt out, but I dealt with every major issue, every major problem, every major hiring in the country. But I didn't have a lot of layers in my businesses, so the onus was on myself. So really, at the end of the day, it's all about the people, the quality, the character, and the talent of the people. And that's why we came out of the gates when I bought MJ Campbell in 78. And by 1990, the closest mover was at least 50 million away from us in size. And even today, it's still by far the largest moving company in Canada.
When I think about moving, I would have thought about, strong guys that can carry beds and chests upstairs. Why is it all about the people? I just don't know. The moving business where you're driving a truck and you're packing up stuff and moving it. I don't understand why that would be all about the people.
Yeah, I've often said the moving business is one of the most difficult businesses in society today. So if you're going to do it, you better do it right. Because it's all about men and machines, problems, claims, 7 days a week, cash business. So we did it right, but we were different. I didn't want to be like any other moving company. For a lot of reasons, we became a very different mover. Just one thing, started to, having women, it was a male dominated industry. And I started hiring women in the early 80s. And before you knew it, I had a sales staff in Toronto, but 6 or 7 were in there, I believe, all women. Eventually it balanced out. Best person for the job, but women add a new element, a nurturing element in the moving business. So we had, as we went across Canada, we had more women in senior positions than any other moving company in Canada. So that was really important. But everything we did was different as we expanded across the country. I remember there were about 300 movers in Toronto, and you couldn't even find us in the Yellow Pages, which is the main place to advertise at the time. And I said to the local rep, look, you can't even find us there. So she said, well, all goes by alphabetical order. So I said, okay, well, we'll register. We registered AMJ Campbell. We got in front of the Yellow Pages. Well, that lasted 2 years. Everybody started to do it. But then we put the van lines on the end and we started to expand across Canada. And I remember sitting in the boardroom with a number of the partners.
So hold on a second. I always thought it was AMJ. You're saying it was MJ, but you just added the A so you could get at the front of the Yellow Pages?
Yeah, we did. We did.
That's hilarious.
And we put the van lines on the end. And I sat in the boardroom and I said, AMJ Campbell Van Lines. What a shitty name. We will never brand that name. But we proved you can brand anything. So it was amazing what we did, but we also were big into partnerships. We became the Olympic mover. A fellow named Jim Murray and I connected, and we had the Olympic mover on our trucks. We moved all the teams, gave us credibility. We partnered with. Then we that was a foray, and my brother Terry was instrumental in Calgary, doing a deal with I think the Calgary Flames. So that's how it started. When we went to the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Toronto Raptors. So we actually patented move of the game. So we would take people down from the rafters and bring them down to ice level or floor level. So we partnered with pretty well every major sports team in Canada, became the Olympic mover. I was on the Olympic Trust Committee for a decade, and it was just a wonderful experience. So everything we did seemed to be. We had
NBA
a lot.
still doing that promotion today, are they not? The move of the game?
They don't. I don't think they do it very much anymore. I think they've lost a lot of their relationships in terms of the movie, the game, and being really hands-on. They don't have the same number of teams that they had before. The culture changed, and that's a whole nother story beyond 1999. So,
Culture and how important culture is.
well, culture is everything. That's what it's culture is about the people, and that culture is about having fun. It's about treating everybody with decency and respect. I said many times, I could be firing somebody tomorrow, but as long as they're in our employ, we treat them well and we respect them.
You
But
know,
we,
sir, culture and people being critically important are not sort of typical boss like attitudes. Some people think people are dispensable, that you can, someone can leave today and you can hire someone new tomorrow. Where does this attitude come that people and culture are so critically important? And why do you believe that when you think so many business people have a different kind of attitude?
well, I've often said that living and breathing customer service. It's hard to teach somebody that. It's inbred or it's inside of you. It's your upbringing. And I still think that most CEOs or managers talk about it, but putting it in action is completely different. And we did it well. We had, I mean, it's all about the attitude of the people. If somebody doesn't have a good attitude, or there's anybody that's toxic in your organization, get rid of them before it's too late. Even I learned that the hard way. So, you can't. It's all about how people think and feel, and having fun, treating people well, and having fun at what you do. We had a lot of fun in our company. I mean, the crazy things we used to do. We used to have corporate parties every year. We have 450 people at a corporate function. And I remember Jackie Stewart, who was a legend in the business, the highest producer in the country. She had this idea: why don't we just all dress up as monks? So we get 50 partners coming down at the Westin Hotel, down the harbor front, coming down an escalator, all in monk outfits. And we had a hypnotist that night. Well, actually, not just that night, other evenings with our corporate clients, because we loved our corporate clients. And a classic story, though, is we had, with 400 and something people in the room, he narrowed it down to about 12 people, brought them up on stage. And I'll never forget this one time. He says, everybody was out. He's got the itching powder. And all 12 people started to itch and scratch and around their bodies, except this one woman in a dress lifted her dress and started to scratch. Well, the place dropped. I was mortified. Never found out whether that was a client's wife or who was it, but it was the funniest thing the whole evening. It was hilarious. So we had so many things going on. We used to have presentations always very important to us. I used to mandate that coast to coast, I'd like all the partners to wear Harry Rosen suits. Very, very important. Dress for success. And if you can't afford it, we'll assist you from a head office perspective. And I remember one guy who was our franchisee in St. Catharines, Ontario. He weighed 330 pounds. I don't think he ever had a suit on in his life. Former truck driver. He walked in with a Harry Rosen suit on during one of our conventions, and people just dropped. So it's the same as drivers. I was the only company in Canada that insisted that drivers wear ties. Now, wearing ties doesn't make you a good mover, Brian, but you know what? Presentation in it, when you initially see somebody, it's critical that people will judge you at the very beginning. Now, I had to convince the drivers to do that. And for the most part, I think, the drivers understood why I wanted them to do it. As soon as they started working, they could take the tie off. So everything we did, we had to be different from the competition. So if somebody's getting in a business, how are you going to set yourself apart? How are you going to be different? So that's all part of my DNA.
And when you say you created a brand for AMJ Campbell van lines, how did you do that? Was that through the partnership with the Olympic movement and the partnership with the hockey teams and the move of the game and things like that?
Yeah, yeah. To every, you know what I recall? It just, yeah. I mean, you got to get your name out there. I remember Imperial Oil, for example. This is in one of the books too. Imperial Oil and their wisdom. Now, we did some moving for them. They were big movers. They'd move 1,000 people a year or whatever it was. And they went to tender to the 5 major van lines. Now, remember, we're part of Atlas Van Lines, okay? So they went to the 5 major van lines. And I called Imperial Oil. I said, look, I know I'm part of Atlas Van Lines, but I'm also a van line within a van line. They said, no, sorry. Uh, we can only deal with the 5 major van lines. I said, I disagree. At that time, CBC's Venture was talking to me. I don't know how we connected. Do you remember CBC's Venture was on years ago?
Yep.
And it had 2 million audience. And I said, look, I'm having a problem in Imperial. Here, corporations in this country are supposed to be fostering entrepreneurialism. They're supposed to be providing opportunity for people that want to be in businesses. And here, they're stalling us. They will not let us bid in their business. And yet, internally, because we have our own companies, we can be more cost competitive than a van line who will deal with 150 different moving companies. So we can save them money. So anyway, there I was. They said, well, we'd like you, we want to tape you on a live conversation with somebody from Imperial Oil. So just one of the battles and the challenges that we had.
Did you win that one?
I'm a live conversation. No, I didn't get their business right away. I didn't bid on the business right away. And I knew somebody that knew a VP there that they were going to sue us. I said, by all means, come at us. They never did. Within 2 years, we had all their business. But you know what? They knew who we were. They knew
certainly did after you put
public,
them on Venture. We got to take another break for some messages, and we're going to be back in just 2 minutes with Tim Moore, an entrepreneurial success story in Canada, and a really interesting gentleman with some great experience and lessons for people that want to get involved in business and leadership and entrepreneurial ventures. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I'm chatting tonight with Tim Moore. He started AMJ Van Lines. At the time, it was MJ Van Lines, and he put on the A just so it would get to the top of the list in the yellow pages. You've got a fascinating background, failing, what was it, grade 3 and math, and grade 13 twice, and then going on to university, both for a bachelor's and started a master's, didn't finish it before you started your trucking business. And you've written a book about how to succeed in business without an MBA, and then another one on leadership. You've had some challenges as well, I understand. You had a big fight in Barbados, I understand, and some other fights. Tell us about some of your fights, some of your challenges.
One thing about being in business, you're going to have your challenges, obviously, and you're going to have your battles. And you have to learn to pick and choose your battles. And I've had so many of them. People used to think I thrived on them. No, I didn't thrive on them, but I wouldn't back away from them. And I could probably talk for hours about the number of battles I've had. You inferred about maybe Barbados. I mean, I buy a house in Barbados, and my neighbor is Eugene Melnick, and which I understand you've got some history there. And Eugene I was on the on the north side of the Crane Resort. And I didn't realize Eugene Melnick, who owned the Ottawa Senators, had bought up every house on the street. It just happened. I befriended a woman in her 80s. Her name was Lurleen. She owned Sunrise Beach Apartments, and I agreed to buy her place. Then I bought the lot next to her. Then she calls me and she says, Mr. Melnick was not happy. He didn't realize that, he'd been buying up everything on the street. He said he would pay us $50,000 more each if we got out of the deal with you.
Tim?
She said, yeah.
So this guy bought up all the homes around you.
Yeah, he did. And again, I bought Lurleen's property, but the guy next door, Lashley was his name, he tried to get out of the deal. I said, no, we have an agreement. You've got your deposit, and we have a legal agreement. And so Eugene kept calling me from his plane wherever he was traveling. And finally, I thought about, he really wanted it badly. I said, what? I won't close the deal. Give me 100,000 US. He said, okay, we got a deal. So he paid 100,000 US. I never closed the deal. Fastest 100,000 I ever made. So that was Eugene, but then he wasn't finished. He wanted Lurleen's Sunrise Beach Apartments, and I'd fixed it up a little bit, and so we had some battles there. My wall got vandalized, and I got the owner of the Crane, who was also Canadian, didn't have the best reputation, and I'm sandwiched between, and they're fighting. Those two guys are fighting, and I'm sandwiched between the two of them. I finally negotiated a deal with Eugene Melnick, and met his lawyer, Ken Cancellara, at BioBill's office. And he did say to me, he draws a circle. He said, do you know why you had the problem with Eugene? He's because he drew the circle. He says, you know what this is? I said, no, this is Eugene's sandbox, and you were in his sandbox. I said, we're not even going to go there. So look, in business, I can go on and tell you all kinds of, you get your battles. You got to know when to fight back.
So what's the secret to success in negotiating your way through those? It's as you say,
do everything with respect, be communicative, be fair, but be serious. So it's all about negotiating and being very genuine the way you do your deal. Everybody's got to feel good at the end of the day, and so. Everything gets resolved. There's always solutions to every problem. I'm a huge believer in that. I've seen enough problems, and there's always solutions. And there's always a better period and a better day,
So what, don't go to court, settle?
Well, I've been to court 3 or 4 times in 50 years compared to our friend, Mr. Melnick, formerly Mr. Melnick. But so if I got a problem, I solve my problems. I don't want to get involved in lawsuits. My time is too valuable. I'm forging ahead. I'm moving too quickly. I haven't got time to have any serious distractions like legal issues. I move on with my life.
You talked about the importance of partners. I used to work for Michael Eisner, who was the CEO of Disney. I'm not sure if you've read his book about partnership, but it's fascinating.
It is, eh?
It's a great book. I highly recommend it. And it's interesting because he changed his attitude. When he first joined the Walt Disney Company, he thought he was, the best guy, and a very capable gentleman from Warner Brothers, Frank Wells, was actually the first person hired by the group that took over the Walt Disney Company, and Frank Wells gave up the senior post because he thought Michael Eisner was key. And Michael Eisner, over his tenure, came to the realization that it wasn't just him that was the key to success. It was his partnership with Frank Wells as the president, and Gary Wilson, the CFO, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, the head of Disney Pictures. And he talks about how he came to this realization that teams and partners grow businesses. And he goes through a description of Microsoft and Apple and Berkshire Hathaway, et cetera, and talks about some of the great partnerships.
And Warren Buffett, yeah. It's all about partnerships.
Most people don't think so. Most people think it's all about them. Why do you think you've got this different attitude?
You know what? Because I've said over the years, I'm not any different than the girls in the suites that clean our suites, or the drivers that drive our trucks, or there are packers. I'm here to be professional, provide the level of service for our clients, and having fun with everybody and treating everybody really well. It's no different than, one thing I did, I've sold all my businesses now, but in our Toronto head office, we had 100 people. And every day I was in that office and I wasn't traveling, I walked that floor. And I think every manager, every owner of every company, walk the floor, get to know your people, get to know the ups and downs and the issues and problems they may be having, be empathetic. And when I left in 99, I got a number of letters, people saying that we're going to miss you walking the floor and walking around. I said, but you know what? I did it for my sake. I want to know what's going on in my company, because the industry knew and I knew that AMJ Campbell was my baby and I cared about it and I was emotionally attached to it. And so I think it's very important for people to get close to your staff and treat them well and provide opportunity and get excited with them and let them, create a bond among themselves in the office. Like I used to encourage them to laugh and joke and talk about your people during work hours. I think that's important.
Walking around is a lot more challenging when a whole bunch of people are hybrid. What do you think about this attitude now where so many people are working half time or even more at home?
I think there's a time and place. At that time, you probably had to do it. But I think it's time to get back to work, because you lose the social interaction. You lose that day-to-day culture you're trying to create. So I would kind of struggle with that. I know like the banks, RBC now is kind of, the banks are starting to get people back. They want people back.
And you think that's right?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do.
The attitude toward sort of branding your own self personally is interesting. I was told that you wore cowboy boots and you drove a Rolls Royce and you always bought the meals. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I was always, yeah. I mean, I've had 3 Rolls Royces. I'm a little bit of a car buff. Um, Even when I had the moving on, people would never understand that. Why would a mover have a $200,000 Corniche Rolls Royce? If you can afford it, do it. Cowboy boots, same thing. I was different because of the cowboy boots. In fact, it got so extreme at one point. I was out west. I bought a white pair of cowboy boots. I come back and I've got my navy blue suit with my white boots on. My wife says, "You can't wear those white cowboy boots." I said, "Bernie, I want to, So she would allow me to wear the white cowboy boots. People may not like or agree with what you do, but you know what? They'll never forget you. And it was part of my, people still say they always know where I'm going in battle mode because I'm wearing my cowboy boots, But I wore them most of the time along with suspenders. And then, of course, I had a mustache, and almost 90% of our male partners, coast to coast, had a mustache at one point. And we had tie contests. There was this camaraderie that brought us to be number one in Canada over a short period of time. So the cars and the fanciness, well, 13 of the partners for 13 years went down to Colorado skiing. And we actually had an AMJ Campbell ski team. Half the guys could hardly ski, but we looked like a good ski team, So we had a lot of fun.
I was told you made all your partners, including the Secretary Rich. Was that a point of pride?
Well, you know what? I said a number of years ago, I can give you 46 names of people that became millionaires. Right now, it's probably 60 or 70. And you know what? I'm so thrilled, and that was my sense of satisfaction that I got. Because first of all, if they do well, I do well. But I am so proud of so many of those people. And in my upcoming book, you'll see a number of them. I take the 10 greatest success stories in half a century. And these are people that started from nothing, like my secretary, who was my secretary for 8 years, became a millionaire a few times over and in early 50s. And I loved it. And I'm so proud of her. We're still dear friends.
What's the name of the upcoming book, sir?
Don't have the name yet. We're 60% away through the book. We had a discussion the other day. We're not sure what the name's going to be yet. So it should be finished by, I'd say, January, and should be published in the spring.
We're going to take a final break for some messages, and be back in just 2 minutes with Tim Moore, the founder of AMJ Campbell, MJ Campbell, numerous other ventures, and a really interesting entrepreneur. We're going to come back and we're going to ask him what the lessons are, what the secrets to success are. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Tim Moore is our guest. Fascinating entrepreneur, and I think best known for AMJ Campbell, but lots of other ventures as well. What other ventures were you involved in, sir?
Well, when I left AMJ, I wasn't my idea actually, but somebody was in the business in Toronto, the extended stay business, and then that's where rather than staying in hotels, people would stay with you for longer periods of time. And that business fascinated me because I always liked owning real estate. So in the industry, you probably rent and re-rent most of your units, but you can also own some of your own property. So I started a company called Premier Suites in 1999, and I took it to 1,200 suites by 2010, and I sold it. They were number one in Canada, and they still are number one in Canada, the largest extended stay provider in Canada. And then I got into the financial services company. When banks say no, people will come to us to loan money. And we placed over the years probably $300 million. Now the rates are high; they're all short term. Keep the rates high, and there are fees attached to every arrangement that we do. Well, we end up selling that to a small bank. So and then we get into Moore Suites. My son runs Moore Suites now. I'm back in the business. And so that's primarily in Halifax. And then we bought a resort called Oceanstone Resort, which was borderline bankrupt when we bought it, had it for 12 years, won the top tourism award in the province. So, you know what? Your style is portable. And again, something hasn't changed. It's all about the people. It's all about getting the right people and bringing people in and get them invested in terms of share ownership.
So, this has been really helpful and interesting. If I had to synthesize what I've heard and some of the lessons learned, and I'd like you to either confirm or change,
Sure.
it'd be number one, resilience. You've had a lot of challenges, failing at school and failing at math, and trying your hand at being a priest and trying your hand at being a teacher, and yet through that whole process, you've learned things and you've improved yourself and your own knowledge base and your experience. But you've been resilient and you've come out the other side. So resilience would be number one. Number two, you've talked numerous times about people and how important people are, and building culture, and having fun, and wearing ties, and everyone having mustaches, and the camaraderie that comes from that. And then you've extended that to not only your people, but to treating your customer service, you said, is so critical, and you'd work 7 days a week dealing with every complaint, and that suppliers, and you brought all your corporate clients to different parties, so that you extended that people attitude to both, suppliers and customers, as well as to your people. And then you've talked about partnerships and how critically important partnerships are, and how many partners you've had, and that you're proud that you made them millions. Anything else?
No, I just think, it's one thing to be successful. It's another thing to don't forget your roots. Don't forget when you started. Don't forget who helped you along the way. And in 1999 to 2003, we had some major issues when I left. The culture changed dramatically over a 3 or 4 year period. And I said to the CEO at the time, I said, this is an opportunity of a lifetime for you. Don't blow it. Maintain this culture. And anyway, that didn't happen. And then we were into another battle. I only stayed on as a consultant for 5 years. After 3 years, I wrote, I'd had enough. I told my wife, I'm not going to prostitute myself for money. I don't need money that bad. They're going to terminate me. But I wrote an ugly letter, and they terminated me. So, you know what? Life goes on. And I'd already started Premier Suites. I'd moved on with my life. And it was fine for me to do that. But I failed at succession planning. And I have to live with that. Fine for me, but I left a lot of people in the crossfire that got affected by that change of culture. So that'll be in the next book. And it's interesting that we got on today, because it was only because of my dear friend Mark I hadn't talked to for a decade, He endorsed one of my books, and I called him up to see if he was still alive or still around. And this is a guy who's a magician in mergers and acquisitions, Mark Barkowski, and he called me back. He said, Tim, I love you. I love you. I hadn't talked to him in like 15 years. And I said, Mark, I love you too. So, it's all about good people in your life. Stay away from any negativity.
Tim Moore, real pleasure, real honor meeting you today, sir, and chatting about your story, your career, your challenges, and your successes, and your lessons to learn about being a successful entrepreneur, about being a great leader, about being a great manager, and just life. Thank you so much, sir.
It's a pleasure.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Chester, Nova Scotia, at www.saga960am.ca. Thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody.